You are listening to She Has No Limits, the podcast.
Once you're shown, you can't unsee. Time is short, you best believe in yourself. You're a formidable force driving, diving lessons in the deep end.
She Has No Limits is a movement and community for professional women to come together, be inspired and learn how to design the limitless careers that we deserve. So today we welcome Micheal Ray all the way from sunny Victoria in Australia. So an individual, he's been on the most incredible journey since he became a dad to Charlie, his daughter, at the age of 49 and became a solo dad at 51. And as a result of his experience as a parent, he is on a mission to address the gender and societal roles that are no longer applicable and the negative impact they have had on organisational, business and personal outcomes. He has done a significant amount of work, and this has led him to be a regular contributor to TV, radio, podcasts. He's an author, public speaker, and has a very keen interest in development and psychology. And we will discover he speaks straight from the heart, and he's known for his dad jokes. I think we're going to have some fun together this morning. So he's been on this journey for 8 years. It's an absolute pleasure to be sharing some time talking about his personal insights and learnings and his vision for the future.
Good evening, Micheal. It's morning here in the UK, but I imagine you've got a lovely sunset coming over the horizon in Victoria, Australia.
Yes, a beautiful summer's evening here. Thanks, Amanda.
Lovely to be chatting with you, Micheal. So without doubt, becoming a parent can be one of the most life-affirming moments we can all experience. But before we start to talk about it, you as a dad and a parent, tell us a little bit more about the man before Charlie, your daughter.
Before Charlie, I came from a pretty standard heteronormative, dad was the breadwinner, mum ran the house type family. It was a wonderful marriage that lasted their entire life. They managed to raise 3 children. 2 of them turned out okay. One's a little bit, iffy. But I worked in a very hyper-masculine industry where as a high-performance strength and conditioning coach and also doing a lot of personal security for rock stars that came through Australia and a nightclub bouncer when I was younger and all of the blokey sports type things. So not really the preparation for being a father. I think my entire preparation for being a father was my mum saying to me maybe once or twice, wait until you have kids. That was about the total instructions that I received.
So how's Charlie changed you then as a person? What have you learnt about yourself?
I learnt that when I was younger in this hyper-masculine type environment, that the majority of what I was doing was basically trying to fit in, trying to belong. And I've realised since that I've been trying to belong to a bunch of blokes that were trying to belong to a bunch of blokes that were trying to belong to a bunch of blokes, and no one actually knew who they were. They were following a script that they thought was a masculine norm. And since having been in the space that I'm in now, speaking with fathers and a lot of men, some of them suffering quite significant challenges in life, it's all turned out to be a facade, and I'm really glad that I've been able to cast that off, and fatherhood has actually allowed me to discover who I actually am as a man and especially as a parent. And a lot of the stuff from my youth, when I look back, was just wasted.
Gosh. I have to say, Micheal, when we first met last year, when we did the She Has No Limits conference together, you had me hooked on hello, or a few words thereafter. I always feel very moved when you talk because of your refreshing honesty and because of the fact that you just don't hear this conversation coming from many men's mouths. Do you get that response?
I do a lot, Amanda, and I think that's one of the reasons why I keep getting wonderful opportunities to speak to amazing people and have such interesting talks about it. It's because a lot of my realisations and epiphany And it's something that I try and get across to men, boys and organisations that, you know, you're going to look back and realise the folly of your ways, hopefully. And I think it was Pross said, you know, the challenge isn't seeing new destinations, but seeing the same things with new eyes. And that's really what's happened when I look back and see how desperately I hadn't internalised any real values. And it was all a matter of just trying to fit in, trying to be one of the crowd. And as I said, I was following a crowd that was following a crowd. And you know, if you ever stood in line for something and realised it was a complete different wrong queue that you should have been in, it was taking me nowhere. And in fact, it was taking me down the wrong path.
It's making me think, much of the publicity that you've gained as a result of all the work that you're doing describes you as solo dad. And I was thinking, is this now how you are identifying yourself? Is this your description of your identity?
No, Catherine, the main reason that it started off with solo dad is because there was a huge and sudden rush to conflate me with men's rights activists. And I'm the furthest thing from a men's rights activist. I find a lot of it so frightening and toxic and just horrific with some of the stuff that they espouse. And there was a little bit of mistrust where I think some of the things I spoke to, it was implied that I was trying to either get more access to my child or that I was somehow embittered or wanting to get involved in family court or divorces or any of that sort of stuff. And that's why I said, no, I've got my daughter 100% of the time. It's just her and I. Her mother and I separated at 9 months of age, and from just after Charlie's second birthday, it's been just her and I. We spent the initial first 5 years until she was 7, just her and I made a conscious choice to stay single. You know, I know a lot of people are looking and thinking, well, no, it's his head and it's his personality that the reason he was single for 5 years. And it's just because Charlie's mum left suddenly and without any sort of warm up or run up to it, no indication that she was going to step out of Charlie's life. I couldn't take the risk of someone getting attached to Charlie and vice versa, only for it to end down the track. So fortunately I had so many wonderful, amazing, supportive female friends that, you know, Charlie didn't run short of female play dates and support and things like that, but I just didn't want to let someone else get attached. And I think a lot of the times, a lot of the women that maybe were interested, if I noticed, were as interested in being Charlie's replacement mum as what they were being my partner, and it wasn't fair on them either. So I decided to stay until I met my wonderful partner now a couple of years ago. So that's the main reason for the solo dad, just to make it clear that, you know, I wasn't in that men's rights activist, and also to show people that if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of friends who describe themselves as solo parents, and I just have so much respect and admiration for them. I think it's a statement that, you know, I'm on my own, but from a position of choice and confidence. And yeah. Can I ask you, you mentioned values, and we're coaches and we love values. And when I became a parent, I was learning all about that good stuff because I was doing my coaching training at the time. So I hadn't worked out what my values were up until that point. So I was on a twin track of learning how to become the best version of myself through the lens of becoming a coach, and also becoming the best version of myself through becoming a parent. And I found the two tracks wonderfully enriching. Difficult at times, you know, because we don't always want to find out everything about ourselves. Lots of people go through life in happy denial, I think, of who they are and what sits under the surface. Tell us more about what you found out about yourself.
I found out that I'm learning all the time, learning more about myself and learning about the impact that I have on others. If having a child doesn't change you in an instant, then you're really missing the journey that childhood has, because you see yourself reflected back So the best of you and the worst of you is in that child, and you go, oh, hang on, I saw that behaviour before and it was from me. And, or I've seen that good behaviour, and it's because she's trying to mimic what I do. And, my daughter's sense of self comes from the examples that I do. And I've learnt that I've had some brilliant coaches. My dad was the best dad I could ever have hoped for and my hero. But, he inspired me. He said, mate, if that's what you want to do, I'll back you. But you wear the consequences if it goes wrong. And, so think about it. And that's why I'd say to Charlie, Bub, I'm learning to be a dad, just like you're learning to be a kid. We've got to work these things out together. And I'm blessed with the easiest kid in the world, so I don't want to make out I'm some, parenting guru. I've just got a really, really easy kid. And I think because it was just her and I for those 5 years, she knows her contributions matter, and it's no different to building a team. When I work with elite level teams, and I work as an AFL strength and conditioning coach, it was all about building the team and the team values and how you fit into the team. And that's why I say to Charlie all the time, Bub, we're a team. So if I say something that you don't think is right, I need you to tell me, because the last thing I wanted to do is bow down to peer pressure or stereotypes or social norms. That's why I say the best I can hope for is to be that little voice in the back of the head when someone's asking her to do something or compromise herself that, this just doesn't seem right, so no, I'm not going to do it. But it's very much one eye on the task at hand, but the vision firmly on the future and how it's going to shape her life.
Mm. So it's really thought-provoking stuff, isn't it? I mean, because we're all parents on the line here, and as you were talking, I've got teenagers, and I was just thinking, how did I learn? And you do learn, don't you, as you go along? And there's a big reckoning and self-awareness in terms of what's important for me and what role do I want to play in this person's life and what do I want to pass to them. Just tell us a little bit more about your source of your values and where you've got those from. Because again, it takes some sort of conscious thought, doesn't it, to think, where did I get my guide and my lead in the decisions that I make?
I was blessed 2 weeks after my daughter's mother and I separated, and again, it was suddenly out of the blue. I had a small car accident, just a minor one, but they took me in to scan my neck just to make sure I was okay. And during that scan, they found I had a couple of tumours in my lungs, some masses in my brain, bilateral pulmonary embolisms, and I'd been tired, but I'd done the bloke thing. You know what? I've got to provide. My ex-wife had 3 children from a previous marriage, so I had to provide for them. So I was working like a madman, travelling with teams and just doing everything I could because I had that outdated gender stereotype of I'm the breadwinner, I've got to provide. I couldn't take time off. And I'd been sick for probably 6 weeks before that, and just get up, go to work, get it done, get home and just sleep. That had put a lot of tension in the marriage. And the minute that doctor actually said to me, and again, I had the next scan, waited for a couple of hours in hospital, got up, caught a taxi home, had the ambulance knocking on the door. They sent the ambulance straight around to drag me back in. And so such stupidity and typical male macho stuff. And when the doctor sat me down and said, right, this is it, that's it, you're in here for a while, we've got to get this addressed, the blood clots in your lungs mainly. Suddenly my house that I'd built and furnished throughout my life had become a burning house, flames leaping through the roof, smoke billowing out the windows. And in that instant, I was forced to decide what was I prepared to rush in and save. And the only thing that came to mind was what effect this was going to have on my daughter, who I hadn't seen for 2 weeks since the separation. And it was just, you know what? Nothing else matters. From now on, if I get the chance, I'm just going to maximise my time with my daughter. All of the work, all of the possessions, all of the position and the prestige that went with travelling with the team just didn't mean anything, because I would actually sacrifice time with my daughter to go away and not be paid any extra, but go away for 3 or 4 days with the team travelling interstate to be one of the team, one of the thing, and thinking, well, it's good because I'm providing, but there was no extra pay in it. the great thing was I rearranged everything, and now I'm able to work for the same amount of money. Once I've set my values, I'm going to prioritise and protect my time with my daughter, and my situation and circumstances allowed me to be innovative and move everything into 3 days a week. So, you know, if I hadn't have been, because there was an abundance, or what I thought an abundance of time, I spent it, you know, wastefully.
Where there's a will, there's a way. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the impact of the patriarchy on women and on mums. So I'm interested, I'm reading this book at the moment, and they talk about human giver syndrome. Are you familiar with this phrase? So lots of women suffer from human giver syndrome, which is I have to be quiet and pretty and calm and beautiful, and I have to be a homemaker, and I have to be all these things to everyone, and that is ingrained in us. You know, it's the tapes that little girls hear: be a good little girl, keep your head down, whereas we treat little boys very differently. It's changing now. So with little boys, we tell them to stick up for themselves, negotiate, pitch for themselves. So, you know, we have to take a very long, hard look at how we are raising our children still to this day. Women, I say this as a coach of women, I say this as a woman myself, sometimes we don't help ourselves. The first step towards helping ourselves is to raise that level of self-awareness, which is the theme for this series, to recognise that this script that we've been given, that we've been told we need to be, we don't have to be a human giver. We are not at service, of service to the society. Tell me if any of this is ringing any bells for you.
Definitely, Amanda, because I'm in a unique position where I get to sit in groups of mums as almost as a peer, but as somebody with a completely different perspective and subjective reality, and men as well. I think it was Kevin Spacey, Kaiser Sose, said the best deception the devil ever perpetrated was convincing people he didn't exist. And I think a lot of women that I see don't realise that they're actually supporting the patriarchy in a roundabout way, with things like maternal instinct, only a mother's love, mother knows best, where they're pigeonholing themselves into all of that extra pressure. So if a woman is struggling with the normal frustrations of raising an infant, whether it be breastfeeding or colic or sleep deprivation or any of the myriad of things, they're a natural struggle, because first-time parents, to think that you know everything is just ridiculous. But women suffer under that pressure. I was basically an idiot, and nobody expected anything to me. As long as I put the nappy on and kept her alive and didn't drop her too often, I was the most amazing, wonderful dad. So by buying into all of this, mum guilt, mum shame, all the rest of it, so mums feel like, well, I should, because naturally I'm better. And instinct, that maternal instinct, implies that there's some innate thing. There's definitely a parental instinct, the need to nurture, protect, and that, you know, your heart just melts. But men's hormones change as well. The oxytocin, our testosterone drops, all of those things that bring it on happen to men as well. So women suffer under this misnomer, but they're also judged so much more harshly. First thing that seemed to happen to mums would be, but what about your kids? Got a stay-at-home dad. Oh, but will he manage? And so straight away there's just those little bits that chip away at your choices and your confidence. But it also makes men second-guess themselves. And I believed in all of that, and I would defer to my daughter's mum in the beginning, but then I found our values didn't align. So I would say, I want to try this. And I often say to dads and mums, there's nothing wrong with having two different parenting styles, because through life you're going to have bosses with different styles, co-workers with different styles, and there's nothing wrong. So don't undermine each other. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with having the same outcome but different approaches. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think women are almost suffering a lot through their own hands, and men are also, just as men do. So these outdated gender expectations set on both of us are just doing us massive harm and holding us all back as a society. And that's why I say, when we speak about only a mother's love, I've had women say, oh, but I carried it for 9 months, I created it. And that's why I say, would you ring your dad and say, Dad, I understand that you couldn't possibly love me as much as Mum because you didn't carry me, but that's okay because you're a man, are you doing your best? And that's why I'd say it's a lot of the times we speak with great clarity and confidence about other people's reality. And that's why I say, oh, but you're a bloke. And that's why I say I get praise, and I love a compliment as much as the next guy, probably a little bit more. But some of the praise and compliments I get, they border on patronising. Where it's just, I'm just being a parent. And when people say you're a great dad, I'd rather say, no, I want to be a good parent, because the bar for dads is a lot lower than what it is for mums, and mums wear the brunt of judgment, and not only from men but from society in general.
Be a good human being.
Yeah.
Now we've spoken about the women. Let's talk about the men, shall we? I mean, you have written, about men for far too long being expected to be the dragon slayers, the cape wearers, the problem solvers, and yet one of the ways that they can support themselves is by starting to show some vulnerability and courage and bravery. And I was interested to see how you were role modelling that.
It was another epiphany, Catherine. One day my daughter said to me, Dad, I wish I wasn't scared of anything like you. And it just made me think that if that's her experience of me, then it's just going to set her up for, when I do feel doubtful or scared or fearful or any of the other myriad of feelings that are everyday things, is she going to feel less than what she should be? And I hadn't purposely set out to do it. So we make a point now of saying, what was something you didn't like today at the end of each night? What was something you did like? And what was something that you feel really good about? And that's why I say to her, Bub, I'm scared, but that's why I say to her, that feeling before we get on the roller coaster and you're nervous and you're standing in line and then you get in and you strap on it and it starts going up that first big hill and you're thinking, oh, what have I done? What have I won? And then at the end of it, you get off and go, whoa, how good was that? And that's why I say, that's life, Bub. The only time that you're feeling anxious and a little bit fearful is it's something telling you that this is important, pay attention, and at the end of it, it's going to be over, and then you can look back and go, you know what, it wasn't that bad. So my daughter's fearlessness is actually a little bit disturbing sometimes. The first time she went off the 3-metre diving board, we were just at the pool, and she said, Dad, can I jump off that? Oh, if you want, Bub. And she's gone, well, I hurt myself. And I've gone, well, what's the plan? And that's why I say I don't go with be careful. I always go with what's the plan, because be careful, she doesn't have the wherewithal to get all the risks. So she, well, as long as I go straight in, I won't do a ballywhack. It sounds like a good plan. I'll give it a go. And off she went. She said, come on, Dad, we'll do it together. And I was like, oh, really? I know. Do you know how high that is? So that's why I say the fear and the anxiousness and stuff like that, it was the same when I work with elite level athletes. It's not about quashing it or ignoring it. It's about realising it's part of the preparation, part of the whole experience of it, and embracing going, this is normal. And that's what stops a lot of the anxiety. And that's why a lot of roughhousing and risk-taking and things like that as kids actually exposes them a little bit, so that when they do become anxious, they've become a little bit habituated to it. So it's not something that shocks them and makes them withdraw, but it just makes them consider a little bit more.
Yeah, teaches them how to manage emotional risk, self-management. Yep. Can we talk about the world of work? You do a lot of public speaking and you do a lot of education in organisations around gender equality. We're in a very safe coaching space here, Micheal. You can speak the truth. It's just you, me and Kath.
Always.
Nobody else listening. Tell us, in your work, what type of organisations are listening, are getting this, are making changes? What is the change that you are seeing happening?
The upper level organisations, the companies that do well, so the top few accountancy firms here, some of the banks are doing it. But my problem is a lot of it's become tick box so there's too many organisations patting themselves on the back for having a shared parental leave policy in place, and it's become a little bit like Fight Club, you know. First rule is don't mention it. Hopefully we don't do it. And that's why I say puppies and kittens aren't just for Christmas, and dads aren't just for parental leave. We have ongoing needs that go. So there's no good saying, great, take your 3 months. Yeah, we're great, we're progressive. And then after that, when you've got a 12-year-old sports day, and it's like, oh, you know, really? And when you look at the statistics, men are more likely to lie about their health than admit that they're leaving work to attend family responsibilities. A lot of men high up in the organisation will leave their jacket on the back of the chair, duck out to the school run and duck back in before anyone notices. And that's why I say my thing is leave loud and leave proud, because the purpose for a career, the why that our career is important, is to provide for our family. So if an organisation wants to support their employees providing for their family and facilitate a lot better work-life integration, because I don't like the balance thinking that, you know, there's a certain amount of either. It's a matter of integrating it nowadays, especially with COVID. The better the team will perform. They'll have less staff turnover, the employees will fire, and the HR departments, that's why I say if you've got the policies in place and the take-up is low, rather than saying, well, it's just men, they're not interested, it's a gender thing, they don't see themselves as caregivers, you need to adjust your policy, but you also need to look at your culture. How many people in there are bragging about working 80 hours a week and firing off emails at 10 o'clock at night to people who have families, or just the myriad of other macho type things, or, you know, teasing a man about man flu while we've got, you know, mental health going through the roof, but we, you know, want to tease a bloke about, you know, being sick. So it's a real cultural thing that needs to step up. But it also goes further. We all want a successful relationship. We don't want a family breakup. We don't want that. So the more equality in the home, the better. With studies out now saying you have a better sex life. So, you know, that's why I say you want to get busy in the bedroom, boys. Get busy in the laundry in the kitchen, because or you're tired and exhausted and carrying the load of all the domestic duty, and then you're going, gee, I can't figure out why, you know, we haven't gotten amorous in the last couple of weeks. The poor woman's exhausted. So the other problem I think we've had, one of the biggest problems we had, was classifying parents as primary and secondary caregivers. To me, a secondary caregiver is, you know, grandma or a babysitter, childcare, things like that. We're both primary caregivers, but by classifying primary and secondary, it's also culturally harmful, because it has the potential to diminish, devalue, even damage the relationship between father and child, but also between mother and employer. And it's also allowed workplaces to become willfully blind to our parental responsibilities. So as much as we're not allowed to, with law and policies in place as far as discrimination goes, when you've got a woman come in of childbearing age and a man come in of childbearing age, they look at it and possibly go, even though they're not meant to, and possibly go, you know what, she's going to be off. If she does go off, he's going to want to work harder to provide. So if we don't push the fact that we've got parental leave, if we do promote him and move him up the ladder, possibly then he's going to be even more invested in his career and more invested in the role as the breadwinner. And it's just that feedback loop where all these little things that go along just add to the death of 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. I have to say, I've been with my husband for 20 years, but one of my lockdown highlights was when I saw him with his rubber gloves on, ready to clean the toilet. That was something that I had not seen before in those 20 years, and I couldn't have loved him any more than in that moment.
Dr. Laura Ratcliffe has got some brilliant work that shows that the more women have access to flexible work and all of the other initiatives, that I actually think have reinforced the outdated gender stereotypes, actually increases the workload on women, because what we've done without a concurrent focus on men having access and being expected to access the same initiatives is actually enable women to continue with the majority of work within the home and also add to their workload outside of the home. So a lot of these initiatives came from a time when men were either considered uninterested or incapable of raising an infant properly. So it was all about enabling women to continue and go out of the home. And it's just actually impacted it even more now. And that's why I say, this whole we can have it all, well, it's just ridiculous, because you end up not quite having anything apart from a lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah. Our last podcast guest, Cheney Hamilton, we asked her if in her darkest moments she ever felt like she wanted to jack in her career, and she said no, never, because I needed my work as an escape from the harder work, which was raising my infants, and I called that out as a truth that we don't hear enough, that lots of parents, and because of the patriarchy we talked about, lots of dads in particular, will use work as an avoidance strategy. Yep.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of blokes do avoid it, but they also avoid it because they've got a fear of not being good enough. And they've also got a fear of how they appear to other men. I still get men, that's why I say I'm a big guy, and I still get blokes want to tease me about, when am I going to go back to real work? When am I going to get a real job? What do you know about parenting? And that's why I say I'm studying developmental psychology. But I also find I'm scared to speak up in a group of mums who are throwing advice at me, and well-meaning, like really supportive, but the most basic things. And I just sit there and go, I hope they don't find out that I write for some parenting websites or do any of this stuff, because I don't want to be quizzed. And I've had mums say to me, well, what do you know about this? You're a man. And that's why I say I think I get the opportunities because it's more, if this bloke can do it, anyone can do it type thing, rather than professing to be some expert.
It's women being their own worst enemy again, isn't it, there, in terms of that judgmental. My younger brother brought up his two children, in terms of being the stay-at-home dad to enable his wife, and he had a tremendous challenge in terms of being accepted by that peer group. So it's interesting.
If you want to feel awkward, you try and walk into a group of mums as a bloke and ask for a phone number for a play date without worrying about whether you're going to come across as creepy and that's why I said one thing that this has really awakened in me is the feeling of being othered, and it's really opened my eyes to diversity and inclusion. And I'll look around now for somebody that's not included and drag them in, because as I say, that stuff that we think goes without saying actually needs to be said. So whether it's somebody of a certain race, religion, sexual orientation, anything like that, they need to actually be dragged in, not, we sit there and go, no, of course I'm, for gay rights, of course I'm not racist, of course I'm not. But when the other person feels awkward, they actually need to be dragged in.
I think my brother's worst experience was the swimming lessons. Sort of standing there in the circle of the swimming lessons and everything, sort of saying it was just, yes, he definitely felt excluded at that point. But yes, I was musing. We've mentioned lockdown and COVID and the pandemic, and Australia is certainly faring a lot better than the UK here. What are your musings, Micheal, in terms of the insight that women are leaving their employment in droves because of this, be it their own beliefs that they've had to pick up, the majority of the childcare or the behaviour of the partner, which is I'll just lock myself in the home office and I'll come out at tea time. What's your thinking from an organisational perspective of how they could help these families?
I don't actually think the pandemic has created any of this. It's just exposed and exacerbated the flawed system that we worked under. So it's like when you try and catch public transport somewhere, right? If I get this train and that one's on time and that one's on time and that one's on time, I can get to my destination on time. Pre-pandemic, childcare, flexible work, all the rest of everything to enable a flawed system to work. We pulled one link out, whether it be childcare or the transport, and the whole house of cards fell over. So it looked like it was working well from the surface, from a distance, but it just wasn't. So, of course, it's impacted women because women had all the balls in the air when they were trying to keep everything going and everything had to work perfectly, and men were focused myopically on their career. And when the roles are swapped, all of a sudden, especially now in the pandemic, dads have become all of a sudden aware, but a lot of dads have embraced this extra time with the family and time away because as mums want time out of the caring to be able to pursue the career, and some of them even just use the degrees and the qualifications they've acquired before they became a parent, dads actually go, you know what, I want some more time. So when I hear the two separate groups talking about what they would like, if we could all get in that one tent together, a big Venn diagram, and you know what? You could overlap. If dads were prepared to work 3 days or 4 days a week and mums were prepared to work 3 or 4 days a week, and the government policies aligned with it, so that you had 1 full day each with the child and 3 days with childcare, it would be amazing. But dads feel locked into that provider. And yeah, so the reason women, they were a lot more precarious, but again, they're their own worst enemy where, I've got to do it because he won't do it properly. And that's why I say to the blokes, well, guess what, sunshine? You can do it good enough, because good enough parenting is good enough, especially in these times. Women might beat themselves up with what we call intensive mothering, where they've got to do everything and hair's got to be right and meals have got to be cooked and hold themselves to such a high standard. But if your hubby's doing something, don't criticise him. Welcome it. Good enough is good enough, because he'll get better at it. And if he doesn't get better at it, I think he's trying to fox you, and he's just, you know what, if I do it that bad, eventually she'll step in and help. Don't fall for it. And it's just, men want to be involved in the minutiae of stuff at work. Oh, there was an email chain I wasn't included on. There was a strategy meeting I wasn't included on. I wanted to be consulted on the hiring thing. Why wasn't I informed about this? And then they get home, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't care. Whatever you want. And that's why I said, you wouldn't do it to a team member who was trying to contribute and asking for input. Why would you do it at home? It's as important at home as what it is at work. So, we men learn things. We're good at technical knowledge. I went to a hairdresser and had lessons for 6 weeks on how to do hair for my daughter because, I'd never done it. And now it's a point of pride. But I also feel like I'm being judged now where Charlie's at the stage where she wants to do her own hair. And I struggle walking to school behind her with a messy ponytail. I feel like, I want to have a sign going, no, I didn't do, I'm better than that. And, or if she goes out, she's at the age where she picks all her own clothes and it's just, Bub, do you really want to wear that? And I've got to wear it, Dad. Well, you do, okay. And then it's like, oh, I'm being judged. I look like steptoe and son here. It's, and then the other day was a good one, 9 years old, and she said, Dad, I'm not going to take fashion advice from someone who wears cargo shorts all the time. And that's why I said, fair point. I'll stay out of your choices, you stay out of mine.
Micheal, how can our listeners access your wisdom and your work? I know you're podcasting and there's a book. Tell us what you're up to.
I've got a book that will be released in June for Father's Day in the UK and Europe called Who Knew? And it details a lot of the stuff where I've just had these epiphanies and a lot of the stuff that dads do and a lot of the stuff that impacts equality directly. The fact that we don't have change tables in men's toilets sends a very big message, the fact that the majority of supermarket aisles are filled with products, domestic products that have women on the packaging and not men, that my daughter noted. It has a lot of the misguided initiatives that I think have just enabled the status quo to continue. And a lot of the stuff where it's just, who knew that dads using full sentences actually increase kids' vocabulary? Who knew that, dad's roughhousing reduces childhood anxiety? Who knew that, and all the studies that are linked to it? And it's a bit of a funny read about some of my dad fails. They can also reach me at michealray.com.au if they want speaking advice and read a lot of my writing and separate podcasts. I think that would be about it.
Wonderful. Shall we finish with Charlie?
Yep.
What 3 things would you like to thank your daughter for?
She's showed me what really matters. It's made me realise it doesn't matter what I achieve, accumulate, or, gather in life. If I fail as a dad, I'm nothing but a failure. The absolute best thing about being a dad is getting a second go at childhood. So seeing life through a child's eyes, everything is amazing and exciting, and that sort of tiredness that you get, I've been there, I've done that, there's non-stop with this kid. I'm 60 next year, and we've just started surfing together. I've surfed all my life, and this was the first summer we've actually surfed together. And now all of a sudden she wants to buy a combi van and, go surfing and things like that. And it's also given me, I think the third thing would be a real respect for our legacy and how we appear and how we treat other people, our impact on others. Yeah, it's about the stories. I always wonder, and as I say to a lot of dads, how do you want to be remembered? What stories do you think your kids will tell about you? And if they're not full of mess ups and laughter and, not the big ticket items, but just those forts in front of the telly with the fish and chip dinners, the lying on the bed, making up stupid stories, all of those things, it's all about the connection and not about the things or the big ticket holidays or anything like that. And as I say, we might not have control over the amount of quantity of time that we have with our kids on a day-to-day basis, but we've definitely got control of the quality. So we can make those moments between the moments the ones that count, and they're the glue that holds it all together.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. Could go on for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do.
Catherine, I've got a confession to make.
Oh, yes.
I'm a little bit in love with Micheal Ray.
He's certainly a lovely, lovely man, isn't he? What a brilliant conversation. I love his passion and his enthusiasm and his love. His love for what he's doing.
Yeah. One thing that stood out for me, it was just a phrase that he used that I'm going to start using more, work-life integration. He's right, isn't he? It's not the work-life balance thing. It's never sat particularly well for me either. It is about integrating our work and our careers into our family lives, with the family at the core of that. Mm-hmm. Like he said, we go to work to provide for our families. It has to work for our kids.
I think that description, integration, also takes away the conflict of balance. Balance is conflicted, isn't it? You're pulling in 2 different directions, where if you integrate, you're pulling together. So yes, absolutely a great expression. I also love the fact that he wants us to talk as parents and not as mums and dads, because again, there's conflict there, isn't there, in terms of 2 different entities rather than one coming together to say we are parenting together. And again, for me, that then speaks about collaboration and working together and not necessarily competing with one another, mm-hmm. Around who's the better mum or the dad or what have you. Very refreshing conversation. A
very wise man and human being. He's faced huge adversity and from that has completely remodelled himself and created a wonderful life for him and Charlie.
I guess my biggest wish is that organisations would sit up and listen. Because actually when he talks, the answer seems so straightforward and easy. In terms of asking organisations to embrace the fact that if we have equality around all the policies and procedures, and we don't differentiate people by their role, so the fact that that is a female of childbearing age and that's a man who isn't, and so we'll give some of this to them and none of that to the other. If we can bring it all together, it means that we can have this work-life integration together.
So whoever you are listening, share this podcast episode with a dad near you and an organisational leader near you. And
a woman. Sorry, Amanda, to interrupt it just there in terms of the let's not be our own worst enemies, in terms of trying to get a real great balance for everybody here and that we all win.
You're right. And so with that, we'll leave you and we'll see you next time. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed. Please send us your feedback. And if you'd like to have a sneaky peek as to who's coming up, then go to shehasnolimits.com and check out our podcast page.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care. All the best.